Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to unpack a series of really significant happenings, some observations too, coming out of the UK. We've got a collection of recent news here that, well, when you put them together, they paint a fascinating, maybe even a little surprising picture of what's going on.
That's right. We're looking at a diverse set of issues, but they seem interconnected. Think about proposed changes to how religious practices are viewed legally, how the sort of physical and cultural landscape of the UK might be shifting,
Right.
what people are thinking about core texts, and even how these things might be, influencing international perspectives.
Exactly. It's the way these different pieces seem to connect. That's what really grabbed my attention. So let's get straight into it. First up, this proposed legislation from a UK Labour Council. It looks like it's targeting certain Christian practices.
This is definitely a noteworthy development. The proposal outlines potential criminalization. We're talking about specific expressions of Christian faith, praying, singing religious songs, evangelism, handing out religious materials, that kind of thing.
And the penalties they're discussing aren't trivial, are they? Up to 2 years in prison.
That's the figure mentioned, yeah. Up to 2 years for breaches.
It makes you wonder, could just handing out a Bible potentially lead to jail time under this?
Well, that seems to be the core concern, yes. The specifics highlighted include criminalizing Bible distribution, prayer, especially prayer involving laying on of hands, even if it's consensual,
Right.
and also what they call healing prayers, which seem to be viewed particularly, well, severely in this proposal.
It's also interesting, isn't it, that the initial draft apparently excludes church buildings themselves. Makes you think, is this just step one? Could these restrictions eventually expand to activities inside church properties?
It's a valid question. The scope can certainly evolve. Right now, church buildings are reportedly exempt, but the proposal also goes after sermons, specifically sermons deemed hostile towards individuals with protected characteristics.
And that covers quite a bit. Religion itself, Islam was mentioned specifically, which is interesting. Sexual orientation, gender reassignment, and violations there carry the most severe penalties.
Hmm.
Okay, let's step back. What really stands out to you about a proposal like this?
Well, it's this balancing act, isn't it? Or maybe it's more of a tension between protecting religious freedom, which is a long-standing principle, and this increasing focus on protecting specific groups from perceived hostility or discrimination.
Yeah.
And that naturally leads to the big question: how do you define hostile in this context? And who gets to decide?
It definitely feels like a potentially huge shift in how religious freedom is understood or practiced in the UK. Now, moving to something else that seems connected, this changing religious landscape. There's a commentator noting how many former church buildings are being repurposed.
Yes, that's a very visual thing. These buildings, once, central to religious life, becoming pubs, McDonald's, mosques, other commercial spaces, it's presented as a possible sign of a shifting societal identity. You can really see the transformation in the environment.
And it's not just isolated cases. There's that anecdote about a factory in Birmingham getting massive orders for custom-made corners, all for mosques. That kind of specific detail really points to a potential demographic shift, doesn't it?
It does illustrate the point quite vividly. And the commentator even gives a rough estimate, suggesting, based on birth rates and migration, England could see a pretty significant demographic change within, what, about 30 years?
Yeah, 3 decades. And the perspective shared is that for some people, these changes aren't seen as positive cultural enrichment. Instead, they view it more like an erosion, maybe a dismantling of what they see as traditional British culture. It's a different viewpoint.
It really highlights the different ways people interpret demographic change. Some see it as natural, leading to a richer society. Others might see it through a lens of losing established norms and values.
And connecting back to the proposed legislation.
Exactly. You can see how shifts in the religious makeup might influence or be influenced by laws like the one proposed.
Right. Now, this next bit is quite something. A UK survey found nearly a quarter of young adults are open to banning the Bible.
A quarter. That's a notable figure.
It really is.
And the reason given, according to the survey report, is this perception that the Bible contains hate speech.
Directed towards minorities and other protected groups.
Yes. So out of 2,000 adults surveyed, about 500 supported a ban.
Not insignificant.
No. And the interpretation offered with these results suggests maybe a broader feeling in the UK, perhaps even the EU, that Christian views might need censoring if they're seen as unaccepting of, say, Islamic and LGBT communities.
And the survey also suggested those communities are seen as far more tolerant by the people supporting the ban. That's quite a statement.
It presents a very specific view on where tolerance lies, doesn't it?
Mm,
How it's perceived across different groups.
it does. And the commentator we've been following contrasts this with their own experience growing up in the UK.
Right, mentioning how different cultural groups assimilated over time.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if these survey results capture the full picture, the lived reality for everyone.
That's a good point. The difference between abstract survey opinions and lived experience. The commentator suggests the issue might not be a lack of tolerance in the culture itself, but maybe specific strong ideologies being imposed on others.
And emphasizing that isn't representative of whole community.
Exactly, which is an important distinction to make.
A really important nuance. Okay, so this leads to some specific examples that seem to show a potential, maybe chilling effect on freedoms. We've heard before about an American preacher arrested in England just for preaching publicly.
Yes, that case got some attention.
And more recently, the woman arrested for silently praying outside an abortion clinic.
Right, these instances do raise questions about the boundaries in practice. And then there was the Finnish MP facing hate speech charges for sharing religious beliefs on social media. That resonated across the EU, it seemed.
And now this very recent news, dated today, April 11th, 2025. Religious groups getting antisocial behavior warnings in a UK city described as predominantly Muslim, just for promoting their faith to shoppers.
Yes, in Leicester. The city council implemented a PSPO, a public spaces protection order, to try and manage these situations. These orders aim to stop behaviors seen as detrimental to the area's quality of life.
Okay.
And the report says Christian groups apparently breached it by singing gospel songs and preaching. This was reportedly found offensive by other religious groups there.
And there's that quote attributed to someone named Reddy Muhammad, saying, "This is no longer a Christian area and people should be more tolerant of our views." That's very direct.
It is. The declaration that it's no longer a Christian area, coupled with the call for tolerance of their views, it highlights the shifting norms or perceived norms in that specific place. It raises big questions about sharing public spaces and accommodating different kinds of expression.
Absolutely. Okay, shifting gears a bit, but maybe related in terms of perception, the U.S. State Department, they've issued travel warnings for several European countries: UK, France, Spain, Sweden, Germany. The UK is classed as grade 2 risk.
Grade 2, yeah.
And apparently, El Salvador is now considered safer. That's quite something.
It's a notable assessment, definitely. Grade 2 means exercise increased caution, so a higher perceived risk than many other places.
And the places they warn about are typical tourist spots: hotels, clubs, restaurants, places of worship, schools, parks, malls, markets, public transport. It sounds quite widespread.
The advisory even suggests local police might not be effective in investigating crimes, advising Americans to contact their embassy if something happens. That implies a pretty serious level of concern about safety and security.
Wow, that's a strong message from the U.S. government. Definitely gives you a different perspective on those countries. Okay, let's turn to the UK education system now. Seems like there are some major pressures there.
Yes, the figures reported are quite stark. 51% of state secondary schools in England
And over half.
have reportedly cut teaching staff, and 50% have cut teaching assistants, all due to financial pressures.
And these cuts are described as the deepest on record. That really underlines how serious the funding challenge is. There's also talk about maybe dumbing down the system, making exams easier.
Which, raises concerns about the quality of education long term. Are students being properly prepared? Adjusting exam standards might seem like a fix, but it could just mask deeper issues.
The commentator also mentioned challenges for working parents with state education and this perceived shift away from the traditional nuclear family. It seems the economic strain in schools has wider social ripples.
If you think back to the demographic shifts we discussed earlier, it's possible these evolving societal needs are putting extra strain on education funding and resources.
Makes sense. Now, a different direction entirely. Technology. This idea of building tech, like in Minority Report. Using AI to predict crime.
Yes, that's the concept.
Yeah.
The claim is the UK is apparently a leader in developing this, supposedly because of the sheer amount of data collected there, using AI algorithms to analyze data, find patterns, predict crime before it happens.
And it's not just the UK. Argentina, South Africa mentioned, some U.S. states too.
That's what's reported.
It's fascinating, but also maybe a bit unsettling.
It definitely raises huge questions. Privacy, surveillance, the presumption of innocence, fundamental stuff. And the risk of bias baked into the data the AI learns from is a major concern too.
Yeah.
How does predictive technology reshape justice itself? Big questions.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, back to the European political scene. News about the EU planning to sanction Serbia's deputy prime minister.
Yes, apparently over a speech at the European Parliament. The reports say he showed little empathy for Ukraine and accused Brussels of trying to undermine the Serbian president.
And it's not just Serbia feeling the heat. Poland, too, right? A court revoking licenses for conservative TV channels just before an election.
That's right, which many interpreted as potential election interference, given the timing.
It highlights the political tensions within the EU, doesn't it? Media, politics, elections. It gets complex.
Very much so. The timing in Poland was certainly controversial.
The commentator we're following is quite critical of the EU here, suggests it's weaponized the political system, talks about corruption, compares Marine Le Pen's sentence for minor crime to others maybe not being held accountable. It's a strong take.
It paints a picture of the EU possibly acting with political motives that might override other considerations, raises questions about impartiality, fairness.
Right. Okay, quick look at the U.S. housing market now, specifically Washington, D.C. A big jump in houses listed for sale.
Indeed. Listings are reportedly up 17% compared to last year. Over 7,200 homes on the market there now. That kind of increase in inventory often signals a shift in the market.
And prices. They've dropped almost 9% in just the last week. That seems fast.
It is a rapid decrease. So, more homes for sale and asking prices falling, it does suggest the market there might be cooling off.
Sellers might be feeling they need to lower prices to get buyers interested now.
Exactly. Could point towards adjustments, maybe even concerns about a localized housing recession.
Something to watch. Okay, finally, let's touch on retirement costs in the U.S. The numbers for retiring early, say at 40, are wow.
They are substantial. The estimates suggest needing over $2 million in savings for New York. Even in a more affordable state like Pennsylvania, it's still over $1 million to retire comfortably at 40.
And healthcare costs in retirement estimated around $14,000 a year in New York. That's huge.
It's another massive factor. The commentator notes the high cost of U.S. healthcare generally.
These figures really drive home the level of planning needed for early retirement in the U.S.
But the broader point being made isn't just about retiring at 40. It's about planning for retirement at any age. The need to diversify, build your own savings, your own pension, alongside whatever the state provides.
Especially with market volatility and economic uncertainty right now.
Precisely. It becomes less about the specific age 40 goal and more about that universal message. Take control of your financial future. Plan diligently.
Absolutely. A crucial reminder for everyone, really. Think long-term, plan ahead. Especially now.
It shifts the focus nicely from maybe an aspirational niche goal to a really practical takeaway for everyone.
Well, there we have it. That was quite the deep dive through a wide range of developments, all from our recent sources. It's pretty remarkable seeing how these different threads, religious freedom restrictions, demographic shifts, safety perceptions, economic pressures, might actually weave together.
Indeed. It really makes you think about the potential long-term impacts on individual freedoms, societal values, economic stability, even just our own personal planning.
So as everyone listening processes this, maybe consider this. In a world changing so fast, how do we strike that balance? The balance between fostering tolerance and inclusion while also protecting fundamental freedoms of expression and belief. Where does that line sit?
And what's our role as individuals in navigating all this complexity?
Exactly. Lots to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring these important issues.